Hello, this is Ryan Narayan at the Kaspersky Security Symposium here in Munich. I have a special guest, David Jacoby, Senior Security Researcher in our Nordic region. David is also a member of the Global Research and Analysis team here at Kaspersky Lab. And today we have an exciting topic at hand, David. We'll talk about automated tools and techniques used to target Linux platform. Can you set the stage for us and explain why security on the Linux ecosystem is just as important in the grand scheme of things as security on client system on the Windows platform? Why, there's this perception that Windows is so much safer than, Windows is so much more dangerous, Linux is a much safer platform, but in reality, Linux is as much targeted as Windows. Can you just set the stage and explain the context of why security on Linux is important?
Absolutely. You just said the problem that most people think that the Linux system is more secure than Windows, and people don't really, focus on securing their Linux machines. And another problem is also that the Linux machines, they're excluded in the normal patch routine. So maybe you will have some kind of routine to patch all your Microsoft platforms, but then you have a bunch of Linux and Unix machines that's exposed on the internet that's not really getting patched, because you need to manually patch everything. And the Linux and Unix system, they are often used to host some kind of service. This might be a web server or a mail server, something that the person using the system interact with. And if you can, for example, change the content on the on the Linux system, then someone from a Windows machine can access the Linux server and get infected by, for example, some malicious code.
Would you say this perception that exists, that Linux is much safer than Windows, actually plays into a general state of bad habits among Linux system administrators managing servers running Linux, that they're less likely to be vigilant about securing Linux servers? Do you think that perception plays into that?
Well, it is not just ignorance. It is the same perception that people or the system administrators just think. They just imagine that the system is more secure than Windows and just don't need to be as patched as often. But on Linux system, the security problems that you have on the Linux system is different compared to the Windows platform, because you have a totally different security mechanism on the Unix platform. Right. You need to focus on something called the ACL, access control list. You don't really have that same problem on Windows platforms.
Right. So how are Linux platforms targeted? Are they using specialized tools, automated tools, script kiddie tools? Give me a sense of what the bad guys are using to go after Linux platforms and how it's done in a general sense.
Of course, there is targeted attacks against the Linux platform, but I've seen through my research that there's also automated tools that you can execute on the Windows machine that will through search engines find vulnerable targets. Unix Linux machines automatically infect them with some kind of a PHP backdoor, and use that kind of backdoor to spread malware, drive-by downloads, steal information, install backdoors, tons of different kind of actions.
So where the targeted attack is much more focused and an attacker actually spends a lot of time preparing to go after a specific target. In this case, what you're saying is not a lot of time is spent looking for specific targets, but they actually do automatic scans of entire networks, looking for potential vulnerabilities, and everything is very automated. All the payloads, everything come down in very automated fashion. Is that the result of Linux servers just left vulnerable, or are they using zero-day vulnerabilities or any sort of fresh vulnerabilities targeting on patch platforms?
The automated tool doesn't use any it doesn't use any zero-day vulnerabilities. They simply download a big database of common vulnerabilities, launch their scanners, go through every single website that they can find. It can be a blog, it could be a, whatever web application. And the problem is also that that particular blog could be hosted on a server where a company has the company website. So it's also about joint resources, that the blog that's most likely less secure than the company website is hosted on the same server or the same network.
Once a Linux server gets infected, what happens after that? How does that play into the insecurity of the entire Windows platform? Explain for the audience how compromised Linux servers actually play into this whole epidemic of drive-by downloads and malware infections on Windows that we're seeing.
Since you don't really have protection against malicious code on the Linux system, you can compromise the Linux system and then infect every single website on that system. And as soon as a person from a Windows machine, they browse the website, they might get infected with some kind of code, because that malicious code is actually hosted on the Linux platform. So that is also a problem, because you don't have the protection against the malicious code on the server side. Then you can upload whatever you want on the server side, and no one will actually detect the malicious code.
Do we have any sort of statistics or numbers you can share on Linux server compromises?
There are public websites out there that, there's a group of people called defacers. That's people defacing websites, changing the content, and reporting it back to these websites. These websites are, it is some kind of game for them. So we don't have full statistics on how many compromised websites that's out there, but you have statistics on how many websites that's being compromised by these people. And in April 2010, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 60 or 70,000 defaced websites just reporting to this single defacement archive.
That's the zoneh.org archive?
Zoneh.org, yeah, that's one of them. And there's another one called attack-h, similar site, hosting malicious code, offering scanners and botnets, and also have this defacement archive where people or these hacker groups, defacement groups, can report their job.
What's the answer? How do we go about as an industry, as a community, keeping Linux servers safe? Is it just limited to making sure stuff is patched? Talk a little bit about some of the hardening, some of the mitigation mechanisms you can put in place to keep your Linux server safe. Some of the general advice you would give Linux system administrators.
It is a combination of a few different things. It is local hardening. I mean, you need to, through configuration, make sure that your application that you're running doesn't allow you to read files from a different directory or write to another directory. You also need to have some kind of protection against malicious code, because if your server got compromised, then you need to find the backdoors or Trojans, or someone uploads malicious code that targets another operating system. You need to find that too. But you also need to have a good patch and vulnerability management routine. It doesn't need to be a software. You just need to make sure that every single application that you have is up to date. And if you have for example, homemade application, you need to, through that configuration, make sure that no one can actually do something sensitive, something extreme with that application if there's a vulnerability in it.
And one last question just to wrap up. Once a Linux server is compromised, and it's a compromise is detected, is it very easy to clean and to patch the installation to avoid reinfection?
That depends, because of course there's rootkits on the Unix and Linux platform too. You can infect the platform and make it, a totally compromised machine. But if they just used this web-based malware, you can detect the malware really easy, and then you can just use simple ways to remove that file.
Thank you very much, David. Hopefully at the end of that discussion, end users get a real good grasp that there's no such thing as a completely secure operating system or platform, and that the security of one platform is just as important to keep end users secure on another, perhaps competing platform. So from the Kaspersky Security Symposium here in Munich, this is Ryan Narayan saying thank you for watching.
Thank you.